Hello students. So let's continue with the next problem on it is proportion. That is problem number it is 5. So I'll read out the problem. So problem is 6 carpenters working 7 hours a day can complete 24 tables in how many days? 120 days. Question is how many days will 12 carpenters working 6 hours a day take to complete? How many tables they have said? 36 tables. So like problems they will ask in the exam for how many marks? 5 marks, because this problem involves more than 2 ratios now. In the last class we have seen some simple problems, right? There is to be only how many? 2 ratios, but here in this problem there are more than 2 ratios. So when the problem involves more than 2 ratios, so that is called what it is compound proportion. So here we are having how many ratios here? 4 ratios. One is the carpenters, then second is hours, then tables and number of days. So 4 ratios are there. So here what they have said, for 6 carpenters, if they work 7 hours daily to complete 24 tables, how many days are required? 120 days are required. And what they have asked you to calculate how many days will 12 carpenters working 6 hours daily take to complete how many tables? 36 tables. So what we have to find here? We have to find out the number of days. How many days it will take? How many days are required for how many carpenters? For it is 12 carpenters if they work 6 hours daily to complete 36 tables. So like this, from the given problem, first you have to put the equation. So that's why always you have to judge correctly what is given and what is asked. So whatever they ask, that ratio always you write at the end, right? And whatever the ratios are given to us, that we write at the start. So how equation you have write here? For how many carpenters? For 6 carpenters. For 6 carpenters working how many hours? 7 hours to complete how many tables? 24 tables. How many days are required? 120 days are required. This is the given to us, right? For 6 carpenters, if they work 7 hours daily to complete 24 tables, 120 days are required. And we have to calculate for how many carpenters? For these 12 carpenters. For 12 carpenters working how many hours they have said? Working 6 hours. Working 6 hours to complete how many tables? To complete 36 tables. To complete 36 tables, how many days are required? This is the question. So here how many days are required to complete 36 tables working 6 hours for 12 carpenters? It is not known. So let's assume it is how many days? X days. Suppose X days are required to complete how many tables? 36 tables for 12 carpenters if they work 6 hours daily. So like this, first equation you have to put, and now one by one what you have to do, you have to compare all the given ratios with what? The number of days. You have to compare the carpenters with the number of days. Now if you go to compare at a time, it is not possible. You cannot judge correctly whether more days are required or less days are required. If you go to compare directly, for 6 carpenters working 7 hours daily to complete 24 tables, if 120 days are required, therefore for it is 12 carpenters working 6 hours daily to complete 36 tables, how many days are required? So it's very difficult to judge correctly whether more days are required or less days are required. So it is not possible. So at that time what we do? We compare the same ratios with the number of days individually, separately, right? So direct comparison is not possible. So one by one you have to compare. So first you have to compare number of carpenters with the number of days. Then you have to compare number of hours with the number of days. Then you have to compare number of tables with the number of days, and you have to see whether these 3 ratios are in direct proportion or in inverse proportion. Okay? So let's compare. So first you compare carpenters with the number of days. So we know what? For 6 carpenters, how many days are required? 120 days are required. So instead of employing 6 carpenters, if you employ 12 carpenters, means if you increase the number of carpenters, so in how many days are required to complete that work, right? More days are required or less days are required, that you have to see. So if there are more carpenters working, so number of days required will be is less. So as the number of workers to do the work increases, number of days required to do the work decreases. So here number of carpenters have increased from 6 to 12, and due to that number of days required are decreasing. So one is increasing, another one is decreasing. So it is said to be which proportion? Inverse proportion. Clear? Means here the number of carpenters are in inverse proportion. So that compulsorily you have to write here. So here you put number 1 and write. Here the number of carpenters, here the number of carpenters is in inverse proportion. Yeah. Then now you have to compare the number of hours with the number of days and see whether the number of hours are in direct or inverse. So compare. If they work 7 hours daily, to complete that work, how many days are required? 120 days are required. So instead of working 7 hours daily, now if they work 6 hours daily, so how many days it will take? More or less? So if you work for less hours, definitely to do that work, more days are required. So here you are working 1 hour less. So definitely it will take more than 120 days. So as the number of hours decreases, number of days required to do the work increases. So again, what change you can see here? Here the number of hours have decreased from 7 hours to 6 hours, and due to decrease in hours, number of days required are increasing, right? So one is decreasing, another one is increasing. So it is said to be what it is? Inverse proportion. So number of hours are also in what it is? Inverse proportion. So here just below this you put number 2 and write. The number of hours, the number of hours is in inverse proportion. Yeah. Now you have to compare what? Tables with the number of days. So to complete 24 tables, how many days are required? 120 days are required. So to complete 36 tables, how many days it will take? More or less, right? So here they have to complete more tables. So if you want to prepare more tables, definitely more days are required. And if you want to prepare less tables, so definitely less days are required. So if as the work increases, number of days required to do the work also increases. So here number of tables have increased, right, from 24 to 36, and due to increasing number of tables, my number of days required to do the work is also increasing. So here both are increasing. Number of tables also have increased and number of days required are also increasing. So when both are increasing or when both are decreasing, it is said to be what it is? Direct proportion. Means here the number of tables are in direct proportion. So here you put number 3 and write. So number 3 is the number of tables is in direct proportion. So like this, whatever may be the number of ratios, first you have to compare them individually with whatever is asked. With that you have to compare all the ratios and you have to see whether they are in inverse or in direct, and then accordingly you have to write those ratios, right? So first ratio is what it is? It is inverse, right? Number of carpenters are in inverse. So you have to write the ratio of carpenters in inverse form, opposite way of write. So instead of writing 6:12, we have to write 12:6. So how you have write? Now while writing the ratios, you just write the ratios one below the other, right? Because here there are more than 2 ratios. This problem knows more than 2 ratios, and whenever the problem knows more than 2 ratios, so you have to convert those number of ratios into one single ratio. That is called as what it is? Compounded ratio. So in the previous class, I have while explaining about the proportion. So there I have explained the types of proportion. In that one, I have explained about the compound proportion and how to calculate the compound proportion. But if you go on calculating the compounded ratio here, so you will waste your time. So instead of that, directly you have to write the compounded ratio. So how to write the compounded ratio directly? Right? So here what happens, first you have to convert those number of ratios into one single ratio. First you have to find the compounded ratio, then you have to put the proportion. So long procedure is there. So instead of that, what you have to do, directly you write the compounded ratio. So how you have to write? So to write that, what we do, we have to write those ratios one below the other. If you write these ratios one below the other, so you will get all the antecedents in one line and consequence on another line. Means what you will get that compounded ratio only. So those number of ratios will be converted automatically into compounded ratio. So let's put the proportion directly. So how to put the proportion directly? So carpenters are in inverse, so ratio how you write 12:6. So here you write 12:6. Then number of hours are also in inverse. So ratio is written as 6:7. 6:7. Then number of tables. So tables are in what direct proportion. So as they are in direct, so it is written as 24:36. 24:36. So like this, if you write the ratios one below the other, so you get all the antecedents in one line and consequence on another line. So this is what we do in compounded ratio. We separate all antecedents on one side and consequence on another side, and if you multiply them, we get a new ratio that is called as the compounded ratio. So if you multiply these antecedents vertically, we get new antecedent, and if you multiply all these consequents vertically, we get new consequent. So that is nothing but antecedent is to consequent, that is called as the compounded ratio. So this is how we have to convert those number of ratios into one single ratio. This is called as the compounded ratio. So these are three ratios we have write equal to the last ratio. What is the last ratio here? It is 120 is to what it is x, and last ratio always we write in direct proportion only. 120 is to what it is x. 120 is to x. So this is called as my proportion. Yeah. And now we have to find out the value of x, and to find the value of x you have to use the rule of it is proportion. What the rule says? In proportion, the product of extremes is equal to the product of means. So last two terms are called as extremes and middle two terms are called as what it is means. So multiply these extremes on one side and means on another side. So let's multiply. So my extremes are 12, 6, 24 and x. 12 into 6 into 24 into x. This is equals to, my means are 6 into 7 into 36 into 120, like this. Now what I want here, I want x value, bring this x outside. So this x is equal to this 6 into 7 into 36 into 120. This remains as it is, and if you transfer all these three terms equal to that side, this multiplication becomes division. This it is divided by, it is 12 into 6 into what it is 24, and now multiply this and divide. So it is x is equal to, so if we simplify this, so it is 12 ones are 12 3s are, it is 3 ones are 3 8s are, then it is 8 ones are, it is 8 8 5s are 40, then it is this 6 and this 6 gets cancelled. So remains what, 15 into 7. So it comes to this 105 days. Means how many days are required? 105 days are required. So for it is how many carpenters? 12 carpenters. If they work 6 hours daily to complete 36 tables, how many days are required? It is 105 days are required. So this is how you have to solve the problem when the problem involves more than 2 ratios. So such types of problems they are asking in the exam. For it is 5 marks, 7 marks, or 8 marks. So you have to be perfect. Here important is how to put the proportion when the problem involves more than two ratios. And very important point is the realization, right? Whether those ratios are in direct or in inverse. Clear? So if you understood this much, so easily you can attempt the problems on its proportion. So I hope this is clear to you all. Or we'll continue with the next problem on proportion. So here is the next problem on its proportion. Problem number 6 it is. So I'll read out the problem. Question is, if 15 men working 12 hours daily reap a field in how many days? 14 days. How long it will take for 21 men working 10 hours daily to do the same work? Yeah. So again, what you have to find here? How long it will take? How long it will take means how many days it will take for how many men? For 21 men if they work 10 hours daily to do the same work. So you have employed 15 men, right, to reap a field, right? You have employed how many men? 15 men, and these 15 men can reap that field working 12 hours daily in how many days? 14 days. So to reap that field for these 15 men, if they work 12 hours daily, so how many days are required? 14 days are required. And what we have to find? How many days are required for how many men? For 21 men, right? To do the same work if they are working how many hours? 10 hours daily. Clear? So here number of days they have asked. So what you have to do? First you have to put the equation as it is. So let's put the equation first. So equation will be for how many men? For these 15 men. For 15 men working 12 hours. Working 12 hours to reap a field. How many days are required? 14 days are required. This is the given to us. For 15 men working 12 hours, right? To reap a field, how many days are required? 14 days are required. And what we have to calculate? We have to calculate for how many men? For this 21 men, right? Working how many hours? It is 10 hours. To reap means to do the same work as well, means to reap the same field. How many days are required? This is the question. So again, this problem involves how many ratios here? 3 ratios. Number of men, number of hours, and number of days. So again, this problem involves more than 2 ratios. So first as it is, now here how many days are required is not known. So let's assume it is x days being required. And now as it is, you have to compare the number of men and number of hours with what? With the number of days. And see whether the number of men and number of hours are in direct proportion or inverse proportion. So let's compare. So first compare the number of men with the number of days. So as I said, at a time we cannot compare it, is not possible. So you have to compare the ratios individually, one by one. So first compare the number of men. So we know what? For 15 men. For 15 men to do a work, how many days are required? 14 days are required. So instead of employing 15 men, if we employ 21 men, if we employ some more men to do the same work, so how many days it will take? More or less? Means more than 14 days are required or less than 14 days are required, that you have to check, right? So if we employ more number of men to do that work, so definitely less days are required, or not? So as the number of men to do the work increases, number of days required to do the work decreases. So here one is increasing, another one is decreasing. So your number of men have increased and number of days required are decreasing. So when one is increasing, another one is decreasing. So it is said to be which proportion? Inverse proportion. Means here the number of men are said to be in a inverse proportion. So just below this, you put number 1 and write there. Here the number of men is in inverse proportion. Then number 2 is what? Second one is hours. Number of hours we have to compare with the number of days. So again compare. If they were 12 hours daily, right? If they were 12 hours daily, to complete that work, how many days are required? 14 days are required. So instead of working 12 hours daily, now if you are working only 10 hours daily, so how many days, in how many days you will complete that work? How many days are required to complete that work? More or less? So if you are working less hours, because previously you used to work for 12 hours, now instead of 12 hours, now you are working 10 hours, means 2 hours working less. So if you work less hours, definitely to complete that work, more days are required. So definitely it will take more than 14 days. So number of hours have decreased from 12 to 10, and due to decrease in hours, my number of days required are increasing. So one is decreasing, another one is increasing. So when one is decreasing, another one is increasing. So it is said to be what it is, inverse proportion. Means here the number of hours are also in inverse proportion. So number 2 you write the number of hours is also in inverse proportion. Okay? Like this. So only 2 ratios are there, right? That we have compared. Now we have to put the proportion directly, right? So how to put the proportion? Instead of finding the compounded ratio, directly how you have to put the proportion. So to put the proportion, what you have to do? These ratios you write one below the other. So first ratio is what? It is man, right? It is in which proportion? Inverse proportion. So ratio of men is written in inverse proportion. How you have write? 21 is to 15. So it is written as 21 is to 15. Yeah. Then next is what it is? Hours. So it is also inverse. Hours are also in inverse proportion. So how you have write the ratio? 10 is to 12. 10 is to what it is? 12. And these 2 ratios you have write equal to the last ratio, means as it is 14 is to, it is written as 14 is to what it is x. This ratio is always written in direct proportion. This is called as the proportion. And now to find out the value of x, now you have to use the rule of proportion. What the rule says? In proportion, the product of extremes is equal to the product of means. Last 2 terms are called as extremes and middle 2 terms are called as what it is, means. So multiply these extremes on one side and means on another side. So my extremes are 21, 10 and x. So it is 21 into 10 into x equals to my means are 15 into 12 into what it is 14. So what I want here, I want x value, so straight away you bring this x outside. So this x is equal to, so x is equal to this 15 into 12 into 14. This remains as it is. And transfer these 2 values equal to that side. So these 2 multiplication becomes division. So it is divided by 21 and is multiplied by what it is. Yeah. And now multiply this and divide. So this x is equal to, so divide this. So 5 3s are 5, 2s are 2 1s are 2, 7s are 7 1s are 7, 3s are, or this 3 1s are 3, 4s are. So 4 3s is how much? It is 12. So how many days are required? 12 days are required. So for these 21 men, if they work 10 hours daily to reap the same field, how many days are required? 12 days are required. Clear? So this is how you have to solve the problems on what it is proportion. So I hope it is clear beyond these 2 sums. Okay. So in the next class or in the next video, so I will come with some more problems on it is proportion. Thank you.